and embrace freedom and democracy. Mr. President, this is not the first time that Argentina has addressed this Security Council regarding the situation in Venezuela. On the 23rd and humanitarian deteriorating situation, noting the effects of the illegitimate regime of Nicolas Maduro transcended the domestic sphere and negatively affected regional stability, constituting a concrete threat to hemispheric security. Summit that Argentina welcomed the pressure from the United States aimed at freeing the Venezuelan people. Today, the poses a dual challenge to support a genuine democratic lasting with both challenges. The Argentine Republic stands ready and willing to cooperate. We reaffirm our firm commitment to the full restoration of institutional normalcy and the rule of law in Venezuela. Always safeguarding the freedom, human dignity and prosperity of the brotherly Venezuelan people, as well as our determination to continue fighting against the scourge of narco-terrorism and those who contribute to its financing. The process that begins today requires the firm and coordinated commitment of all those countries that have accompanied the Venezuelan people in their long struggle, so that Venezuela can leave behind more than 2 decades of political, humanitarian and social crisis, and can finally be reunited with freedom, democracy, respect for human rights and economic prosperity. Mr. President, finally, the Argentine Republic requests that the authorities responsible for administering the transition in Venezuela contribute to the immediate release of the Argentine citizens since the 8th of December 2024 in clear violation of guarantee. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Argentina and now give the floor to the representative of Chile.
Gracias.
Thank you, Mr. President. Chile would like to thank Somalia for convening this informational briefing under the item threats to international peace and security. We'd also like to thank Madam Rosemary DiCarlo, USG for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, as well as the briefings from Mr. Jeffrey Sachs and Ms. Mercedes de Freitas. President, Chile would like to express our deep concern at unilateral military action taken by the United States in the territory of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. We also reiterate consistently our firm commitment to respect for international law, sovereignty and territorial integrity of states, and the peaceful settlement of disputes, the prohibition of the threat or the use of the threat of force, and full respect for human rights. These affirmations are accepted by the majority, and they must maintain their importance in order to preserve international peace and security. We said this on the 23rd of December when we took the floor, and we reiterate this today. Chile does not recognize the Maduro regime, but serious violations of human rights being faced by Venezuela do not have a military solution. They can only be addressed through peaceful, gradual and inclusive measures that will take into account the legitimate aspirations of the Venezuelan people. Respect for international law does not allow for exceptions, including when it comes to addressing the illegitimacy of a president. Problems must always be solved within the normative framework that we have provided for ourselves as nations. The future of Venezuela must include free elections, citizen participation, and international assistance, and not with actions that could create dangerous precedents or escalate tensions in the region, and with serious consequences for the population. Chile own experience with the loss of democracy, where there was foreign interference that caused extreme damage and pain for the Chilean people. We were able to recover our democracy through a transitional process that was carried out with the assistance of the international community, the strength of organized citizens, and through our institutions. Mr. President, Chile would like also to underscore the urgent need to continue with coordinated efforts multilaterally to address transnational organized crime, and we're also convinced that Latin America and the Caribbean must continue to be a zone of peace, because that zone of peace not only serves Latin America and the Caribbean, but the stating humanitarian consequences in Venezuela and in the region. It will worsen the suffering of the civilian population and worsen even further the displacement, insecurity and vulnerability aspects of the situation. We reiterate that any differences must be dealt with exclusively through peaceful means in strict respect for international law, the sovereignty of states, and the prohibition of the use or the threat of the use of force. As was recently indicated by the head of state of Brazil, Chile, Mexico, Uruguay, and Spain, we express our concern with regard to any attempt to control government administration or foreign. This would be against international law and would threaten the political, economic and social stability of the region. Mr. President, he welcomes the role that could be played by multilateral fora, and here particularly we would refer to the role of the United Nations, and particularly the role that could be played by the Secretary involved to contribute to de-escalating the situation and searching for prudent leadership and experience of our organization, as well as the regional organizations and mechanisms, could be very relevant to avoid a further worsening of the situation and to keep open the to support constructive initiatives that will point in this direction for stability and mutual understanding and respect for the principles that underpin this organization. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Chile for the statement and now give the floor to the representatives of Brazil.
Mr. President, we'd like to thank Somalia for convening this emergency session of the Security Council. Brazil categorically and firmly rejects the armed intervention in Venezuelan territory in flagrant violation of the Charter of the United Nations and of international law. The bombings on Venezuelan territory and the capture of its president cross an unacceptable line. These acts constitute a very serious affront to the sovereignty of Venezuela and set an extremely dangerous precedent for the entire international community. The Charter of the United Nations establishes as a pillar of the international order the prohibition of the use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state, except in the circumstances strictly provided for therein. The acceptance of actions of this nature would inexorably lead to a scenario marked by violence, disorder, and the erosion of multilateralism, to the detriment of international law and institutions. The effects of the weakening of international governance, the record number since the Second World War of 61 active armed conflicts, the unprecedented disaster around the world, reflecting the increase in wars, displacement, and crimes against humanity, such as the genocide in Gaza, and the global increase in military spending, which is approaching the historical mark of $2.7 trillion. As Brazil has reiterated on numerous occasions, the norms that govern coexistence among states are mandatory and universal. They do not admit exceptions based on ideological, geopolitical, political, economic, or any other kind of interests or projects. They do not admit the use of force or the illegal change of a government. The multipolar world of the 21st century, which promotes peace and prosperity, must not be confused with spheres of influence. We cannot accept the argument that the end justifies the means. This reasoning lacks legitimacy and opens the possibility of granting the strongest the right to define what is just or unjust, what is right or wrong, and even to ignore national sovereignties, imposing the decisions to be taken by the weakest. Latin America and the Caribbean have made peace a conscious, lasting, and irreversible choice. The resort to force in our region evokes chapters of history that we believed we'd left behind us and endangers the collective effort to preserve the region as a zone of peace and cooperation, free of armed conflicts, respectful of international law and the principle of non-intervention. Armed interventions in the past have had profoundly negative and lasting consequences. And democracy, those interventions produced authoritarian regimes and serious violations of human rights, leaving as a lamentable result thousands of dead political prisoners, tortured persons, and disappeared persons whose families still today search for their loved ones, as well as justice and preparation. For the first time in South America, a profoundly alarming event has occurred. An external armed aggression with the deployment of troops and bombings in a neighboring country contiguous with Brazil, with which we share more than 2,000 kilometers of border. Mr. President, South America is a zone of peace. I insist upon that. We have upheld and will uphold with full determination peace and non-intervention in our region. Furthermore, Brazil does not believe that the solution to the situation in Venezuela lies in the creation of protectorates in the country, but rather in solutions that respect the self-determination of the Venezuelan people within the framework of its constitution. The events of January 3rd transcend the regional sphere. The attack on the sovereignty of any country, regardless of the direction of its government, affects the entire international community. This and other cases of armed intervention against the sovereignty of a country, its territorial integrity, or its institutions must be vehemently condemned. It is up to this Council to authority and obedience to international law in order to prevent the law of force from prevailing over the force of law. Brazil trusts that the future of Venezuela will be built by the Venezuelan people through of international law. Thank you.
For Brazil, for the statement, and now give the floor to the representative of Mexico.
Señor Presidente.
Mr. President, thank you for having convened this emergency meeting of the Council. The government of Mexico has already made its position clear with regard to our condemnation of the military aggression of January 3rd against targets in the territory of Venezuela, in clear violation of Article 2 of the Charter of the United Nations. These actions must not be allowed, as they constitute a severe blow to the Charter and to multilateralism. To clarify the following points. 4 points. Number 1, the prohibition of the threat or the use of force against the sovereignty, territorial integrity, or political independence of any state is the foundation of international law, regardless of the country or the government involved. Two, or expansion of military actions, including to other countries in our region, threatens regional stability. Three, the Security Council has the responsibility and, above all, it has the obligation to act decisively and without double standards in the face of serious violations of the Charter and to restore international peace and security in strict adherence to the provisions of Article 24 and observing Article 27.3. Four, it is for sovereign peoples to decide their destiny and negotiated solutions to their political differences within a framework of unrestricted respect for human rights. Regime change by external actors and the application of extraterritorial measures are not only acts contrary to international law, but historically, all they've done is exacerbate conflicts and weakened the social and political fabric of nations. Mr. President, esteemed colleagues, despite the political differences among our governments, Latin America and the Caribbean has been forged as a zone of peace. Collectively, available political and legal mechanisms available in order to peacefully settle disputes. The violation of this fragile balance gravely endangers the political stability as the well-being of our peoples. Those who justify these acts deny the independence history of Latin America and the Caribbean. Mexico's firm institutional principles of foreign policy and its pacifist calling emphatically reiterates that dialogue are the only legitimate and effective way to resolve existing differences. I reiterate the call of the President of Mexico for the UN to do more to resolve this and other conflicts. In view of the events of January 3rd, Mexico reaffirms its willingness to support any effort at facilitating dialogue, mediation, or providing assistance that promotes peace in the region. That this session of the Council has been held only now, when what we face is a serious situation that puts international peace and security at risk. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Mexico for his statement and now give the floor to the representative of Paraguay.
Presidente.
Thank you, Mr. President. The delegation of Paraguay, I would like to thank the Presidency and the members of the Council for the opportunity to take the floor at this. Paraguay has already pointed out the situation with regard to Venezuela under President Maduro and the Cartel de los Soles and the criminal organization that was formally declared as such by our national authorities, and the exit of the leader of that terrorist organization should immediately lead to the restoration of democracy and to the rule of law in Venezuela, making it possible for the popular will expressed at the ballot box will be the foundation for reconstruction in Venezuela. We would also urgently call for the release of all political prisoners that are still in the prisons of that country, and we reiterate that a return to democratic institutions in Venezuela and the possibility for the legitimately elected authorities to resume their functions are fundamental steps for stability in the region. And finally, Paraguay reaffirms our historic commitment to the peaceful settlement of disputes, and we would observe the current events in Venezuela, and we would urge democratic means to be given priority for an ordered transition. Our commitment will continue to be to the democratic principles of the rule of law and peace in society. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Paraguay for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Cuba.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Cuba aligns itself with the statement to be delivered by Eritrea on behalf of the group of friends of the United Nations and Uganda on behalf of the non-aligned movement. Since plans of the United States and its aggressive projection against Venezuela in the region, we have clearly been exposed to the serious and unpredictable consequences of the irresponsible conduct of the U.S. government for the political, social, and economic stability of Latin America and the Caribbean, and more generally for international peace and stability. On the 23rd of December, in this very body, we set out the sequence and escalation of actions carried out by the United States with the aim of overthrowing by reinforce the legitimate and constitutional government of Venezuela and destroying the civic-military union. The United States resorted to various maneuvers to materialize its plans for domination, including extrajudicial executions and acts of national waters of the Caribbean Sea, as well as the imposition of an illegal naval blockade against Venezuela and the politically motivated designation of its legitimate government as a foreign terrorist organization. Previously, it had subjected that country to prolonged unilateral coercive measures, economic asphyxiation, smear campaigns, and attacks against some of its important institutions, exposing it to a cruel psychological war. With absolute disrespect for the Charter of the United Nations and international law, including relevant resolutions adopted by this Council and by the General Assembly, on January the 3rd, United States military forces attacked Venezuela with total brutality and, in an unacceptable and barbaric act, kidnapped its legitimate president. Nicolas Cuba condemns in the strongest terms the military aggression of the United States against Venezuela, while categorically reiterating its absolute support and solidarity with the Venezuelan people, and joins the demand that the government of the United States release the constitutional president, Nicolas Maduro Moros, and his companion, Celia Flores. In the criminal attack, 32 Cubans lost their lives in combat actions. They were carrying out missions on behalf of the Revolutionary Armed Forces and the Ministry of the Interior at the request of counterpart bodies of that country. Our compatriots honorably fulfilled their duty and fell after fierce resistance in direct combat against the